Hey there riders, Journo Kris here today. I have got the Suzuki GSX-R1000R from MotoHUB in Castle Hill. I've got their demo bike for the day and I thought I'd give you my quick test impressions. I've spent a couple of hours, I've done a nice loop out of Sydney, my normal test loop, and certainly there's been some things that have really impressed me about this bike, and there's been a couple of things which I've been a little bit disappointed with. However, keeping in mind this is a super bike and it's very much a track orientated machine, that's perhaps not unexpected. So the gem in this bike is the engine, without a doubt. It is a VVT inline 4, it is an absolute stonker, it's got beautiful torque down low. The variable valve timing means the spread of power is quite broad and the torque is broad, which means you've got drive everywhere. And it's a really fun bike to ride because it has got an intoxicating intake howl and it's got a pretty mean exhaust note despite that enormous bread box on the back. As far as performance, way more than I could ever ask for on a road bike. Thrilling, fun, eggs you on to ride the bike significantly harder than you perhaps should. However, that's everything you could ask for in a super bike as far as the road performance. On top of that, we're getting the up-spec Showa forks. These are the balance-free forks and shock, fully adjustable on both ends, which is a step up from the standard GSX-R1000 when you look at the proper R model. Electronics cover all the bases, but it's a simple LCD dash and simple switch block system. If you want your bike talking to your phone so you can play around with settings while you sip your latte in the cafe and ogle your bike parked outside, bad news for you. The ogling part should go just fine. I say simple, but it's also an elegant solution in my mind. I'm not a huge fan of those hugely complicated electronics and switch blocks. After all, most riders probably find a setting we like and leave it there with minimal fiddling around between rides. Of the three ride modes, A mode offers a more flowing and instant aggressive character with less engine braking and better off-throttle fueling taper off. B mode is a more all-round mode and a bit more restrained with more engine braking and is a bit more relaxed as a result with less flywheel momentum and rolling momentum on a closing throttle. The bike can be a little rough rolling off the throttle in some situations, but upper gear normally solves these issues, while there's a 10-level traction control system that's easily switchable on the run. Plus, the third ride mode, C mode, is just for wet weather. There's good, strong, powerful front braking power, but there was a little bit of lever travel before it came on, and not the most initial bite, which was a little surprising given the Brembo calipers. At lower speeds, that lever travel and lack of bite was a bit annoying. However, pushing harder at higher speeds made a lot more sense in offering good control and not being too aggressive. It was easy to transition off the brakes deep into the corners as a result, but you did need to be pushing hard to really appreciate the setup. The forks are well supported on the brakes too, but the sheer power made weight transfer an issue on the rider side of things, especially at higher speeds. It was also a little bit harsh on the front at times over rougher roads, where normally the rear is where I really notice suspension issues. Of course, most noticeably the rear shock was exceptionally harsh over bumps in the road, even on bumps that you would probably barely notice on bikes with a soft or more road orientated suspension setup. It was harsh enough to be pushing me out of the seat even when fully locked into the bike, and this should be adjustable out, but it made it hard to appreciate the bike on our typically bad Australian roads. Apparently the standard GSX-R1000 is a bit more suited for this out of the box, so that's worth keeping in mind, as there's no doubt the 1000R is meant to be a track weapon. On the better, smoother roads, the GSX-R1000R shined, being able to take advantage of the incredible drive and amazing brakes, with great flickability and the handling stability and feeling of solidity really coming to the fore. That's a characteristic shared on the GSX-S and Hayabusa to an extent too. This isn't a flighty bike, and there's no doubt it'd be breathtakingly good on the track, which is where it really belongs. Although as someone who enjoyed riding a supersport for years on the road, I do think if you really love the bike, you should be able to get it set up a bit more comfort orientated. However, when I did that on my bike, it was with minimal worry of taking it to the track, so any trade-offs were easy for me to make. That snazzy looking seat is also a very dense foam, and I found it too hard for my bony butt, especially with the shock kicking the rear so much and also pushing me forward into the tank painfully at times. Some stomp grips on the tank would help enormously here, as the GSX-R1000R is a very wide bike across the tank and between the knees. General ergonomics are very aggressive. It's a short peg to seat ratio, which puts weight straight onto those pegs, which is what you want. However, if you're not sold on the full superbike ergo, you may be in for a surprise. Reach of the bars and those clip-ons is likewise aggressive. They are low, and while for the first hour I was easily able to hold my weight off the bars, the harsh shock made that impossible as the speeds rose, and I started to get a bit fatigued, fighting to lock into the bike and stay in position. Especially with the front braking package at speed, it became impossible to keep weight off the bars hard on those brakes, as I couldn't get enough grip onto the tank, particularly if the rear was dancing around. That's mainly a setup issue. The bike is designed for the track, and I'm probably too light for the stock shock settings anyway, but if you've heard of a rider horrified by the full sports bike experience, they are probably talking about having this happen to them when testing one of these bikes, and I don't really think that this is the normal expectation, because as I said, there's so much adjustability within these suspension systems. A couple of other points of note: the exhaust is huge, but once warm, the bike had a nice exhaust growl to accompany the intake howl. I definitely liked that, and the bike is by no means left sounding like an electric mower. There was also good wind protection from the screen and good vision through the mirrors. The GSX-R1000R also apparently uses the IMU for cornering ABS and modulating mid-corner braking pressure, as well as running the braided lines and a bi-directional quickshifter and racing launch control. Upshifts were faultless, however the downshifts were a little rough at times without a noticeable auto blip coming into play, but that may have just been me fat-footing the shifts. Interestingly, it seemed to work well on the downshifts in more casual, around town kind of style riding at 60 to 80 kilometers an hour, and then significantly better at much higher speeds, particularly hard on the anchors into a corner, knocking it down through multiple gears in quick succession. Now, I'd be lying if I said that test riding the GSX-R1000 was anything but punishing. The harshness of the rear shock was significant enough it had a bleed-on effect into many other areas where the bike would otherwise have really shone. However, the package on offer on the smoother roads was breathtakingly good and will have you giggling in joy. But if you're riding our goat track like Australian roads, you'll need to get that suspension sorted, I would say. Like I said, I've lived with a super sport bike long term, and I know it is possible, but perhaps don't expect to buy the GSX-R1000R and for it to offer Hayabusa levels of comfort out of the box. Now, with the GSX-R line currently being phased out in Europe due to their emissions in 2023, it's likely we'll see these bikes dropped in the near future, especially alongside Suzuki pulling out of MotoGP, with racing clearly not having the sales impact it once did on motorcycles. That mirrors the GSX-R600 and GSX-R750 being in a similar position, which is sad considering the history of the model line and how iconic they really are. With the current generation GSX-R1000 being the pinnacle of that line, it might be a good idea to grab one now before they're all gone. Overall, a road ride probably isn't the best place to test the mettle of the GSX-R1000R, but for many riders that's where they'll spend the majority of their time. There's no doubt this is a special machine with eye-catching livery and iconic GSX-R styling, alongside an impressive loadout, if one that may not have some of the bells and whistles, especially in the electricity department of some of the other superbikes available these days. Also, being brutally honest once again, the superbike offerings have been making less and less compromises for the road in recent years, instead really doubling down on being the absolute best sports bikes you can find for the track or racing, as that's clearly their niche. You can check this bike out at MotoHUB in Castle Hill if you're interested. Anyway, let me know what you think of Suzuki's GSX-R1000R. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.